The alert crawled again. Interpol notice. Positive match, like a mouth repeating her secret in front of everyone. A junior registrar laughed at something on her phone, unaware. A security guard scratched his chin, unaware. A boy with a split eyebrow whimpered and pressed a cartoon blanket to his face, unaware. The world continued as if the floor had not just shifted beneath her, as if the past hadn't grown a new hinge. Hildegard, tucked between the river and the embassy district, knew its share of diplomats and drifters, but never a global alert tethered to her own face. The night had arrived in shades of blue steel. Rain threaded down the glass canopy where ambulances reversed in steady choreography, lights washing the ceiling with sweeps of ghostly color. Inside, fluorescent light laid a hard edge on every stainless surface. The air smelled of antiseptic and coffee that had boiled too long. She put fresh gauze in place, lifted the chin, scanned pupils, documented without flourish. She had become good at being ordinary. She had built a life from the habit of not being noticed. She moved through the triage bays with the economical grace of someone who had done this forever. Turn, check, tape, reassure. Anonymity wrapped around her like a second set of scrubs. On her badge, Marie Fiorello, RN. In a file that didn't officially exist, Agent Fox, debrief pending, extraction delayed. The attending swept in, hair damp from the rain, placing the ultrasound probe like a chess piece. They worked in wordless tandem, squeeze the bag, adjust the mask seal, secure a line. The old woman's chest rose, fell, hesitated, rose again. The son stopped pacing and gripped the bedrail, as if he could conduct the breath into her lung with his hands. When the wave on the monitor found a rhythm, it was small and stubborn, the pattern of a person who had decided she was not finished yet. She slid beside the bed, checked the airway, called for suction, felt the pulse fade and return, a stuttering candle in a draft. The son kept saying he should have insisted earlier, that she never complains, that she hates hospitals. The machine answered with its flatline and spikes. She heard herself give instructions with an evenness she did not feel, while in the periphery the red banner on the terminal blinked through the open door like a lighthouse that doesn't care whom it saves. She caught the stretcher rail and steered toward Bay 3, cataloging details even as the back of her mind counted routes out, counted cameras, counted the guard's distance to the panic button. The bracelet's letters were stamped shallow, the veins were fine, the skin was cold. She asked the girl a question and answered it for her with a blanket, with the tilt of the bed, with the gentleness reserved for people who have not had enough years to acquire scar tissue. When the fellow arrived, sleepy and brilliant, he scanned the tracings and asked for the last 10 minutes of vitals. She relayed them with precision, not because she wanted to impress him, but because accuracy is its own religion. The fellow nodded, adjusted a setting, and suggested observation with telemetry, simple, careful, humane. The girl's lips lost their blue edge, her hand unclenched. She said she was studying architecture and had a test tomorrow on tensile structures. The plan unfurled in her mind with the ease of something well-rehearsed, change into a delivery jacket from the bin. Steal a cap, walk like she belonged to the night crew. Keep her head down, she could. But room 6 would need a hand transfer to ICU. The boy with the split eyebrow would need stitches and a story that made it brave. The cyclist's wife had called and would arrive with a sweater and questions. The girl in bag 3 would pretend she wasn't scared until the dark turned her honest. She said this as if the body were irrelevant to its own limits, as if the heart were a student that could be guilted into compliance. The registrar's laughter from the desk drifted in, tiny bells of normalcy. They were still deciding whether the alert deserved a call. The rhythm on the monitor stuttered again, and she saw, with the clarity she hated, the fast approach of a threshold moment. She could call the electrophysiology fellow and roll the dice on a pathway that might break open into complications, or she could do the unfashionable thing and wait with vigilance, steering with fluids and patience, buying time until the rhythm chose to step back from the cliff. Only one asked for tenderness. Relief opened in the room, not joy but a temporary ceasefire. The attending nodded once to her, the kind of nod that carries gratitude without fuss, and moved to call ICU for a bed. She was lying about at least one of those. She would live with that. The name was the one used in hotel lobbies and on encrypted calls and in places where the floor plans were memorized and the doors were never opened without a plan for closing them again. Seeing it here felt obscene, like graffiti on a headstone. She stepped out, washed her hands until the water ran cool, and finally allowed herself to face the terminal. The photo was old, taken in a train station cafe, hair darker, shoulders squared, mouth set in a line that could be read as patience or warning. The name below it was not hers, not Marie, not the one her mother had used in the kitchen when slicing pears and telling stories that never ended where she said they would. She timed her breathing to the wall clock. 3, hold, 5, hold, and heard the door to the ambulance bay open as fresh air slid in with two paramedics who smelled of wet wool and diesel. A crash cart rattled past, pushed by two interns who had the jittery focus of people called into a game they didn't know they were playing. Room 6, Code Blue. She smelled the metallic promise of adrenaline even before she caught sight of the patient, an older woman, gray hair pasted to her temple, family shaking on the threshold. The attending was on the way, but the rhythm of the room didn't wait for titles. She adjusted a cervical collar on a cyclist whose knuckles were gray raw. He kept apologizing, as if apology could stitch skin. She spoke with the soft authority that makes pain blink and pacing slow. The sound of her own voice steadied her, a metronome that beat back the memory forming at the edges, an airport in Warsaw. A woman on a bench who never looked up, a silver coin flipping once in a gloved hand. Behind the desk, the registrar clicked the notification and frowned. The system asked if staff recognized the individual. Her mouth formed the start of her given name, then paused, then changed course. She told herself a lie so gentle it felt like kindness. They won't take it seriously. The photo is grainy. They would never look at a nurse and see a ghost from a security memo. The guard leaned in. The registrar shrugged, the cursor hovered. She stepped backward through the curtain and into the corridor and allowed the half-life of adrenaline to tremble through her. She could leave now. If she walked to the stairwell and kept walking, she could make the freight elevator, the laundry dock, the alley that fed toward the river where no one looked up from their cigarettes. She could dissolve into the rain and let the city swallow her, as it knows how to swallow people who ask it for anonymity. Your name, the girl whispered, voice like paper. She hesitated, tasted reality, and chose it. She said Marie, and watched the girl relax as if the syllable itself were a sedative. A truth tailored for this room, a truth that mattered more tonight than any other. She felt the alarm before she heard it, the way a storm announces itself in air pressure and silence. The monitors sang their shrill chorus, but the charged nurse's eyes were on the wrong screen. Not the heart rate, not the oxygen graph, but the visitor terminal where a red banner pulsed across the top like a wound. The emergency department of St. She had taken the night shift for months now because nights dispense their own forgiveness. Paperwork thins, small talk evaporates, the city quiets enough to let the human body announce its flaws. She liked the honest hieroglyphics of lab results and the way a steady hand could lower the volume of fear. She liked the way people trusted her. It filled the space where her old work relied on different fuels: deception, leverage, the choreography of pressure. Both worlds demanded steadiness. On the opposite wall, the terminal chimed again, and this time the security guard did look. He squinted at the photo in the red banner and then toward the bays as if the answer might wave to him. She knew how the system worked. She had helped design its behavioral training years ago, when her actions carried diplomatic cover and a different hospital issued her immunization records with a different name. The algorithm would have searched arrivals, visitor logs, payroll databases. It would have cross-referenced until it spit out a probability score with righteous confidence, and some analyst in line would have nodded and decided to push an alert to local partners. The timing told her something valuable. Someone, somewhere, had decided she was no longer useful. She stood between the red banner and the nearest patient call button and realized that the decision, like so many she had made, was less dramatic than the world would believe. She stayed, not because she owed the hospital or because she was fearless, but because the work she was doing felt heavier on the scale than the weight of her fear. She told herself she could buy an hour and then another. She told herself the algorithm would quiet. She told herself that extraction could wait for dawn. The girl's eyes lifted to meet hers, and there was a flash of a different recognition, trust that had not yet learned to be cautious. It hit her with an ache. How easy it is to be believed when you wear the uniform of helpers. The guard finally tapped the screen. He said something into his radio in a tone that pretended it was bored. The registrar made the call. Somewhere above, In the administrative floors that smelled of carpet and meetings, a phone began to ring. The rain thickened against the canopy. She pulled on fresh gloves so her hands would not betray the tremor. In Bay 3, the girl asked if she was going to be okay, and she answered in one unbroken sentence that wrapped the truth in practical certainty. We're watching you closely. Your numbers are moving the right way. We're not letting go. She smoothed the blanket as if ordinary comfort could be a disguise. She felt every camera like a touch on the back of her neck, and still she moved at the speed of care, the single rhythm that had redeemed so many of her worst choices. The hospital thought she was just a nurse. The system thought she was a file to be retrieved. The night thought she was a shadow. She decided, for one more hour, to be all of them at once. The call reached administration before the first elevator dinged. A message relayed in clipped syllables, possible high-priority match, confirmation pending. It spread through the chain of protocol like static, tripping sensors, waking supervisors who still believed they ran a normal hospital. Somewhere in the glass office above the aisle, a man in a tie straightened his posture, closed his spreadsheet, and called security to quietly verify visual contact. Below, Marie felt the hum change the way the floor seems to inhale before a quake. She had lived through worse alerts. In Bucharest it had been the sound of boots in a stairwell. In Tangier it had been the click of a camera lens that shouldn't have known her face. She knew how fear dressed itself in professionalism. That was what hospitals and intelligence agencies shared. Both demanded composure while lives hung in limbo. So she kept moving. She handed off a syringe, charted a vitals trend, and told herself that routine was armor. The red light on the monitor pulsed again, washing her gloved hands in color like blood seen through glass. She turned her head slightly, enough to glimpse the guard's radio pressed to his shoulder. His lips barely moved, but she caught the rhythm of the phrase visual confirmation. She exhaled through her nose, long and even, letting her heart slow to a count she could control. The trick to staying invisible was not stillness, it was the choreography of belonging. She crossed to the supply room, each step measured, neither hurried nor slow. Inside, the hum of refrigeration units covered the noise of her breath. Metal shelves lined the walls, saline, bandages, for tubing, but she reached for the high shelf where staff left personal items between shifts. Her hand brushed the strap of her bag, and memory slammed through her like a pulse. A briefing room in Lyon, maps spread across a table, a photo of a man with a scar that bisected his eyebrow. Her last mission before she chose exile. The words came back like a verdict: infiltrate, extract, disappear. She had done two of the three. The intercom cracked. Security to emergency, Bay 3. The voice was polite, almost bored. The kind of boredom that precedes chaos. She stepped out, face composed, eyes scanning reflections in the glass doors. The ambulance bay was bright with rainlight, the drops scattering every red flash into tiny mirrors. The guard appeared at the far end, postured to careful. Behind him, the attending from room 6 called for assistance with a transfer. The world continued to pretend it was ordinary, and that was her invitation. She moved first to the patient because that was who Marie Fiorello would have moved toward. The old woman's monitors beeped in soft time. Her skin had that translucent fragility of someone halfway between this world and the next. Marie adjusted the flow and murmured something about comfort. The son nodded, relief misting his eyes. No one noticed that her gaze slid to the reflective surface of the heart monitor, tracking the guard's approach without turning her head. The first officer to reach the desk wore a rain-dark uniform and the expression of a man who hated uncertainty. He asked for identification protocols, voice low but urgent. The registrar's eyes flicked toward her just once, enough. She caught it. She smiled, small, human, entirely wrong for the situation, and it worked. The man's doubt stuttered. Doubt always saved more spies than courage ever did. Then the hallway lights dimmed, just a fraction, as the storm outside took one of the city's grids with it. Generators coughed alive, the monitors blinked. And in that hiccup of darkness she made her decision. She pressed the son's shoulder gently, whispered stay with her, and turned toward the staff elevator that serviced the sub-basement. Not to flee yet, but to control the perimeter. If she was going to be taken, she would choose where. The elevator doors opened with a sigh. Inside, the camera above the panel blinked its little red diode. She met its gaze and almost laughed at the symmetry, her watching herself being watched. She thought of the analyst in line again and wondered if he was proud, frightened, or just tired. As the doors slid closed, the last thing she saw was the guard moving toward her station, touching the empty chair where she had sat. Below ground, the hospital's silence was a different species, thick, refrigerated, humming with machines that didn't sleep. She followed the corridor toward the archives, where old records slept in dust. Her shoes squeaked softly, a metronome against the low throb of the generators. Somewhere above, they would realize she was gone. Somewhere below, the air smelled faintly of ozone and something older, like iron filings and memory. For the first time that night, she let her real name echo inside her mind, not the one on the badge, not the one on the alert. Just the name whispered by a mother who once thought her daughter would be a teacher, not a ghost. It grounded her more than fear ever could. Upstairs, the intercom burst alive again. Code silver, level B, possible intruder. She smiled, a small, sad thing. They had no idea. She wasn't an intruder. She was the infection buried inside their own system, awakened by accident. The corridor stretched like an artery, long and gray, lit by pulse blue emergency lights that turned every shadow into a secret. Down here, the air was colder, humming with the low vibration of the hospital's unseen heart, the generators, the oxygen pumps, the servers that recorded every second of life and death above. Marie walked like someone moving through memory, not space, her pace steady, her hands still trembling beneath her gloves. The archive room appeared at the end of the hall, its steel door propped open by a box of old files. A single lamp glowed inside, spilling a faint circle of yellow across the floor. Dust hung in the beam, lazy and weightless, as if time itself refused to move faster than necessary. This was where the hospital kept the ghost records of surgeries, signatures of the dead, every heartbeat logged and dated. She stepped over the threshold, and for a moment the world narrowed to the sound of her own breath. She wasn't hiding, not yet. She was listening. To the whir of ventilation ducts, the rhythmic thump of machines, the faraway murmur of footsteps echoing down the stairs. They were coming, carefully trained but not expecting resistance. She knew that rhythm. She had walked with men who moved that way, with precision meant to feel invisible. She remembered how it felt to be part of a system hunting someone who believed they were the exception. She wondered if that's how they saw her now, one file gone missing, one mistake worth recovering. Her gaze landed on an old metal cabinet labeled Personnel 2007 to 2014. She opened it. And inside, beneath brittle folders and patient rosters, she saw what she hadn't expected. Her own handwriting, slanted, confident, on a folded report. Case 421 Fiorello. It was from her first real mission under hospital cover, the operation that had turned her from field medic into covert courier. She touched the paper and felt the warmth of a life that had once belonged to her. Those years had been sharp and clean, now they were residue. The footsteps drew closer, 2, maybe 3 of them. She turned off the lamp, letting the darkness take its rightful place. A sliver of light leaked through the crack beneath the door, and in that faint illumination she could see her reflection in the cabinet glass, half nurse, half phantom. The badge around her neck caught the dim light, her alias glowing softly like an artifact that no longer fooled anyone. She took out her phone, the screen's faint glow coloring her face pale blue. A signal flickered, weak, but alive. An encrypted channel buried beneath her contacts list, something she hadn't used in years. She hesitated, thumb hovering over a name that hadn't appeared on any official network since she'd disappeared. C. Varga. He was the one who had taught her how to vanish, the one she had betrayed when she left. She typed a message without thinking. Compromised. Interpol alert. No safe exit. Possible extraction needed from St. Hildegard Hospital. She deleted it before sending. Old habits screamed that help came with a price. And she wasn't ready to owe anyone again. The door creaked. A flashlight beam sliced through the dark. Basement clear, a voice said. Male, young, trying to sound calm. Another answered, negative, checking archive wing. Marie stepped back behind a row of shelves, keeping low. Her movements were measured, surgical. The beam swept over the room, stopped on the open cabinet, lingered, then moved away. One of the men muttered something about the storm and faulty systems. Their complacency was her shield. When they left, she waited until the silence stretched too long to be a trap. Then she exhaled for the first time in minutes. Her heart was loud in her ears, but her mind was clear, almost too clear. The hospital wasn't just a place of refuge now, it was a chessboard. And if they wanted her cornered, she'd decide which corner. She opened the emergency supply closet, searching through equipment until she found what she needed: a stack of sterile scrubs and a visitor's lab coat with no badge. She stripped her soaked outer layer, replaced it, pulled her hair tighter, adjusted her mask. When she looked again in the reflection, even she could barely recognize herself. A different woman stared back, paler, harder, someone built from necessity. Before leaving, she returned to the cabinet and slipped the folder with her handwriting inside her coat. It wasn't sentiment, it was leverage, the kind that might still buy her a life if everything above ground collapsed. The elevator at the end of the corridor blinked faintly. The up button glowed red. Someone had called it down. She felt the vibration of cables, the heavy clank of machinery. The doors opened slowly, revealing the reflection of the same red Interpol alert banner glowing from the panel display. Her alias, her face, no escape left in silence. She stepped inside anyway, because the only way to survive was to go back up. The elevator climbed like a heartbeat, struggling against gravity, slow, deliberate, uncertain if it wanted to reach the surface at all. Inside, the fluorescent lights trembled under the strain of the storm above. Marie stood against the wall, still as a pulse before the monitor beeps, the folder hidden beneath her coat pressing like a secret against her ribs. The metal walls reflected her in fractured echoes, each reflection a different woman: nurse, fugitive, soldier, liar. The display flickered between floors. She counted each one: Sublevel 2, Sublevel 1, ground, each blink a reminder that time was running out. The hospital was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a trap built from trust and protocol. She thought of the patients she had left behind: the girl with the arrhythmia, the son with the trembling hands, the old woman clinging to life because someone had refused to let go. The image steadied her. Whatever happened next, she would not vanish as a ghost. She would go out doing what she had chosen, saving someone, even if no one remembered her name. The elevator chimed, and the doors opened to the main corridor, a long spine of polished linoleum reflecting red emergency lights. At the far end stood two security officers and a man in a charcoal coat who didn't belong to the hospital. He carried himself with bureaucratic precision, his expression carved from stone, the small badge on his lapel catching the light like a blade. Interpol. She recognized the stance instantly. Weight balanced, hand near pocket, voice trained to command silence without shouting. She stepped out as if nothing were wrong. Her shoes squeaked faintly against the floor. A nurse passing by greeted her. "Marie, they need you in observation." Marie nodded once, grateful for the shield of normalcy. Every second bought in calm was another move on the board. She kept her shoulders squared, her pace measured, her face angled toward the next corridor. The agent's gaze followed her, but he didn't call out. Not yet. Behind her, a radio crackled. "Subject confirmed in West Wing. Proceed with caution." Caution, she thought. That was generous. They still believed they were hunting a threat, not a woman who had already decided to stop running. She turned the corner and entered the observation unit. Monitors flickered across the walls, displaying pulse lines that rose and fell like quiet mountains. The girl from the metro lay in the nearest bed, eyes open now, fear swimming just beneath the calm. When she saw Marie, something in her posture softened, trust reborn too easily. "You're back," she murmured, voice faint. Marie smiled, small and human. "Just checking on you." She adjusted the flow and checked the monitor out of habit. The rhythm was still fragile but holding. She wondered if the girl understood how lucky she was, how quickly the body could turn betrayal into survival. Then she saw it, a reflection in the glass door, movement at the corridor's end. Two officers approaching, silent but certain. Her pulse tightened. There was no more time to pretend. She leaned close to the girl and spoke softly, her voice steady even as her chest burned with adrenaline. "If anyone asks, tell them I went toward the pharmacy." "Do you understand?" The girl nodded, confused but obedient. Marie pressed her hand once, a promise. A goodbye, and slipped through the side exit toward the stairwell. The stairwell was a throat of concrete and echo. She descended one flight, then stopped, crouching as footsteps reverberated from above. A man's voice ordered, "Seal the south entrance." "She's on this level." She could almost taste the metallic tang of pursuit. The storm outside rumbled like an ally, masking sounds with thunder. She reached for the emergency door, pushed it open, and was met with the hospital's courtyard, a rectangle of rain, ambulance lights smeared into streaks of color. She ran, not fast, not desperate, efficient. Her body moved with the precision of someone who had trained for escape in tighter corners. Rain slicked her hair to her face, the cold bit through her coat. She could hear the shouts now, closer, the word Fox cutting through the wind like a bullet. She reached the far wall, where the maintenance tunnel connected to the old wing, a part of the hospital sealed off after the last flood. The keypad blinked red, denying her entry. She knelt, fingers steady, and bypassed the lock with a motion she hadn't used in years. The click of success was almost tender. She slipped inside, pulling the door shut behind her, sealing the world out with the sound of rain fading into silence. Inside the tunnel, darkness swallowed everything but her own breathing. Pipes dripped overhead. The air smelled of rust and memory. She pressed her back to the cold wall, let her eyes adjust, and laughed once low, bitter, genuine. She hadn't laughed since Warsaw, not since she decided to become Marie instead of Fox. Now, it seemed, the two were merging again. She wiped rain from her face and whispered to the dark, "You found me. Congratulations." Her voice echoed down the tunnel like a confession to no one. She took out the folder from under her coat, looked at the old handwriting, and realized that what she was holding wasn't just evidence of her past, it was proof that she had once been more than what the hospital thought she was. More than what Interpol believed they were chasing. The lights flickered once, then twice. Somewhere behind her, a metallic door clanged open. Voices spilled in closer now, sharper. She tucked the folder inside her jacket and started walking deeper into the dark, toward the old morgue wing that hadn't seen daylight in a decade. If they wanted Agent Fox, they would have to follow her there. The air grew denser with each step she took, as if the past itself pressed against her chest, heavy and metallic. The tunnel narrowed until it opened into the old morgue, an abandoned part of St. Hildegard that even staff pretended didn't exist. The overhead bulbs hummed weakly, throwing out pulses of light that trembled before stabilizing again. The room smelled of disinfectant layered over years of silence. Tables covered in dust stood like monuments to forgotten names. Marie ran her gloved hand over one, leaving a trail through the gray. It was here, 10 years ago, that she'd stood for her final debriefing as Agent Fox. The hospital had been her cover, the morgue her meeting point. She remembered the code phrases, the clink of metal trays, the cold certainty of obedience. Now the same place waited for her as if time had folded in on itself, returning her to the beginning of her exile. She sat on a steel table, catching her breath. The folder inside her coat felt heavier now, pages that carried her handwriting, her guilt, her proof. She opened it slowly, the paper soft with age. Inside was a report titled Operation Glass Vein. She skimmed the first paragraph and felt her stomach knot. A covert extraction gone wrong. Collateral damage listed as to medical personnel deceased, her own signature at the bottom, approving the action. She'd buried that memory under layers of good deeds, every wound she'd stitched, every patient she'd saved, but guilt is a muscle memory. It doesn't forget how to ache. A sound broke the silence, metal scraping against metal, footsteps, voices. She closed the folder, eyes darting toward the dark corridor. The acoustics down here played tricks, she couldn't tell how close they were. She rose from the table, moving quietly toward the old storage locker at the back of the room. It was half open, filled with boxes and hospital linen. She slipped inside, crouching low, her breathing measured. "Level be clear," one of the voices said, muffled. "She's somewhere in the old section. No exits down here." Another replied, "They say she used to work for them. Interpol's calling her a ghost agent. You believe that?" The first man laughed softly, nervously. "If she's a ghost, I hope she's friendly." Their voices receded, fading into the hum of the generators. Marie waited another 30 seconds before moving. The storage door creaked softly as she stepped out. She couldn't afford to wait for rescue or capture, both were different forms of surrender. She needed a new exit. In the far corner, a ventilation shaft caught her eye. Large enough for one person, rusted, but possible. She dragged a metal stool under it, climbed, and pushed at the grate. It resisted, then gave way with a harsh shriek. The sound echoed, bouncing off the tiled walls. She froze. Silence followed, but she knew it had carried far. She pulled herself up anyway, body protesting, adrenaline keeping her steady. The metal scraped her gloves, sliced her forearm. Blood welled, warm against the cold. She didn't flinch. Inside the shaft, the air was thick and stale. She crawled forward, elbows digging into the narrow space, counting her breaths. Each movement felt slower, heavier, until light appeared ahead, a faint, shifting glow. She inched toward it until she could see the source, a maintenance room above the hospital's old boiler chamber. She pushed the grate open and slid out, collapsing to her knees. For a moment she just sat there, chest heaving, rainwater dripping from her hair onto the concrete. Her reflection stared back from a broken panel on the wall, pale, blooded, human. Not an agent, not a nurse, something in between. Then her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, heart thudding. A single message, and traceable, appeared on the dark screen. "You shouldn't have stayed, Fox." She froze. No name, no origin, just the words, and below them, a timestamp that proved someone still knew how to find her. She felt her pulse hammer against her neck. Whoever sent it wasn't Interpol. They were faster, quieter, closer, and they were already inside the hospital. She pocketed the phone, stood up, and reached for the emergency axe mounted on the wall. Her hands no longer shook. For the first time all night, she wasn't just running, she was preparing. If they wanted Agent Fox back, they would have to earn it. She moved like muscle memory wrapped in silence. Every breath counted, every footfall timed with the hum of the generators. The message still burned in her mind. "You shouldn't have stayed, Fox." Not a threat. A warning, one that could only come from someone who had once been on her side. The boiler room was a cathedral of steel and noise. Rusted pipes crossed above her like veins carrying heat through the hospital's concrete body. The rain from outside echoed in the vents, a distant heartbeat against the storm. Somewhere above, the pursuit continued, boots on tiles, radios crackling, orders, but down here the world shrank to pulse, breath, and purpose. She pulled a maintenance coat over her scrubs, hid her badge, and followed the glow of flickering light deeper into the maze. The emergency lamps reflected off puddles on the floor, painting her reflection in fragments. She thought of the patients again, the ones who didn't know that the woman who held their hand was the same person governments had once erased from existence. She thought of the girl with the bracelet, her fragile pulse fighting to stay. That memory steadied her more than fear ever could. Then footsteps, not the clumsy rhythm of security. Too quiet, too deliberate. "Marie," a voice said from the dark, low and steady. Or should I say Fox? She froze. The sound came from behind the pipes, calm, confident. A silhouette stepped into the light, a man in a black raincoat, his face half in shadow. His accent clipped. "European. It's been a long time." "Varga," she whispered. He smiled, tired and bitter. "You disappeared. Well, we thought you were dead." "I was," she said. "That was the point." He took a step closer, holding his hands out. "Not a threat yet. You could have called. You left too many strings untied." "I left the agency," she replied. "I left everything." He tilted his head. "And yet here you are, back where we started. The morgue, the hospital, the storm. It's poetic." She gripped the axe tighter, her pulse climbing. "If you came to kill me, get on with it." He almost laughed. "Kill you? No, Fox. I came to clean up your mess. Interpol's not the problem. You are. You stayed too long. You made them notice." He pulled a small device from his coat, sleek, black, blinking red. "They're not after you for what you did back then. They're after what you still have." Her fingers brushed the folder under her coat. The old report, Operation Glass Vein. "They think the file died with you," he continued. "You shouldn't have opened it. The minute you accessed that record, every satellite and database linked your alias to the past. They flagged you because someone upstairs wants that information buried for good." "Who?" she demanded. Varga's expression darkened. "Doesn't matter. They'll erase this entire hospital before they let you walk out." Lightning flared through the high windows, momentarily painting both of them in white. She saw the truth in his eyes, not anger, but regret. "Then help me," she said. "Help me save them." He shook his head. "You don't save places like this, Fox. You burn them." Then, from somewhere above, an explosion of sound, a crash, alarms blaring, the smell of smoke. Power flickered, died, came back half-heartedly. The hospital's grid was failing. The red emergency lights blinked like open wounds. She stepped forward, voice low. They're evacuating. You can still stop it. He looked at her, something like admiration flickering through exhaustion. You never learned when to quit. And you never learned how to forgive. Before he could answer, the sprinkler system roared to life, drenching everything in cold rainwater. The red light on his device blinked faster. She lunged. They collided, steel against flesh, water against flame. The axe hit the floor, sparks flying as metal met metal. He grabbed her wrist. She twisted free. Years of training resurfaced like a language she thought she'd forgotten. One hit, two, then silence. He fell back, breathing hard, a thin line of blood tracing down his temple. Run, he said hoarsely, before they seal the exits. She stared at him for a second too long, then turned and ran through the corridor, up the maintenance stairs, back toward the surface where alarms wailed like wounded sirens. Behind her, Varga's voice echoed once, lost in the roar of machinery. Fox, don't let them make you a ghost again. The stairwell shuddered with life as power surged back through the hospital's veins. Lights flickered, sirens screamed, and smoke rose from somewhere deep below. Marie pushed through it all, lungs burning, shoes slipping on wet steps. Every alarm was a heartbeat counting down to something inevitable: evacuation, collapse, exposure. She didn't care which came first, as long as she reached them in time. When she burst back into the main corridor, chaos had already bloomed. Patients on stretchers, nurses shouting orders, doctors hauling oxygen tanks through the haze. The storm outside had turned into a wall of sound. Rain pounded the glass like it wanted in. And still, in the middle of it, the girl from the metro lay in observation, pale but alive, monitors holding her fragile rhythm steady. Marie's chest tightened at the sight. She'd spent a lifetime pretending the world was disposable. This one fragile life proved otherwise. Marie, the attending called, relief cutting through panic. We lost power in telemetry, manual transfer to ICU. She didn't answer. She moved, fast and automatic, locking the stretcher rails, checking vitals, guiding the team through smoke-thick air. She could hear the guards shouting somewhere behind the noise, their radios full of words like containment and section lockdown. She ignored them. For these last minutes, she was a nurse again. No aliases, no missions, just instinct and mercy. As they reached the ICU doors, the power flickered once more. The hallway went red, bathed in the pulse of emergency lights. The sound of boots echoed from the far and Interpol officers advancing, weapons raised, cautious but relentless. She turned, saw the girl's terrified eyes, and made her decision in one breath. She grabbed the stretcher's handles, pushed it toward the ICU team, and said, "Steady as oxygen, keep her alive." Then she stepped away, back into the smoke, back into the corridor that glowed crimson like a memory of fire. The officers shouted, "Hands where we can see them." She obeyed slowly, carefully, her palms open, her hair dripping. She could see their faces now, too young, too clean, still believing they were on the right side of something. One of them, the man in the charcoal coat, lowered his weapon slightly when recognition flickered. "Agent Fox," he said, voice shaking, "you're under arrest." She smiled faintly. "You're too late." From deep below, a muffled detonation rolled through the building, the boiler room. The lights died. A shockwave rattled the ceiling tiles. For a heartbeat, the entire world went silent except for the steady tone of the girl's heart monitor still echoing through the hall. When the lights returned, the officers blinked into the haze. The hallway was empty. No nurse, no agent. Just smoke, water, and the scent of burnt metal. Outside, ambulances screamed into the flooded street. Patients were loaded under flashing lights. The man in the charcoal coat stared at the hospital entrance, radio pressed to his ear. "Subject missing," he said, voice breaking with disbelief. "Presumed." He stopped, looked toward the river. The mist shifted, and for just a moment, through the rain and flashing red, he thought he saw her standing on the opposite bank, coat clinging to her frame, folder tucked beneath her arm, watching, waiting. He blinked, and she was gone. 2 days later, the news cycle called it a gas explosion. No casualties, no mention of an Interpol operation. The file on Agent Fox was sealed, classified, forgotten again. But in a small, underfunded hospital along the coast of Spain, a new nurse signed her first night shift report. Her handwriting was calm, steady, familiar. The name on the badge read Clara M. Fiore. When the supervisor asked if she'd worked in hospitals before, she smiled politely and said, "Once, a long time ago." Outside, rain began to fall again, washing the windows in silver. And in the background, a single heart monitor kept time soft, stubborn, alive.